Clowns get laughed at, mocked, sometimes even feared. That's part of the job. I've been a clown for almost a decade now, and I'm used to people not taking me seriously. Honestly, it never bothered me much. If someone wanted to laugh at me, that just meant I was doing my job right. Most people think clowning doesn't pay anything, but you'd be surprised. Birthday parties, school events, festivals, there's always someone who wants a colorful idiot to juggle and trip over his own feet for their kids. I worked freelance, which meant the money wasn't steady, but it was enough to keep a roof over my head and food in my fridge. I actually liked the freedom of it. Unfortunately, freedom doesn't pay the rent when people stop hiring clowns. It started when that new It movie came out. Suddenly, everyone remembered that clowns were supposed to be scary. Parents got weird about hiring us. Kids who used to laugh started crying the moment they saw the red nose. And then, those idiots on Halloween started dressing up as creepy clowns and chasing people around for internet videos. Business tanked overnight. I was already struggling when I went to meet Steve at our usual bar one night. Steve and I had known each other since high school. Back then, I was the skinny, weird kid who got shoved into lockers, and Steve was the guy who pulled me out of them. He wasn't a perfect guy, but he always had my back. Life hadn't been kind to him, though. He fell into drugs after graduation, the kind that chew people up and spit them out. I tried to stay in touch, tried to help where I could, but you can't drag someone out of a hole they're determined to stay in. Still, once a month we met for drinks. That night, he looked worse than usual. "I'm done, man," he said, staring into his beer like it held the secrets of the universe. "Nobody will hire me. I've tried everything." I thought about it for a moment. Then, the dumbest idea I've ever had popped into my head. "You could try clowning," I said. Steve blinked at me like I'd just suggested he become an astronaut. "You serious?" "Well, yeah. I mean, why not?" At first he laughed. Then he realized I wasn't joking. After a few drinks and a lot of convincing, he finally agreed to give it a shot. We came up with a character for him, Stevie Strong. A big friendly idiot who tried to help kids but kept messing everything up in funny ways. Think strongman meets lovable moron. I helped him make a costume, showed him how to book gigs, even brought him along to a few of my parties so he could see how things worked. And the crazy thing? He was good at it. Really good. Kids loved him. Parents tipped well. Within a few months, he was booking his own gigs without my help. I was proud of him. For the first time in years, Steve seemed like he was turning his life around. Then, the second It movie came out. After that, my phone might as well have been a brick. No calls, no bookings, nothing. Meanwhile, Steve seemed to be doing fine. At our next bar meetup, he told me he had a side job related to clowning that paid insanely well. "You helped me out when I needed it," he said. "Now it's my turn." I should have asked questions. I didn't. Instead, I followed him to his house later that night. The place was bigger than I expected. Quiet, too. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. He led me down into the basement. At the bottom of the stairs was a metal cage. "Step inside," Steve said. "What for?" "Just trust me. I want to show you something." I trusted him. That was my mistake. I stepped behind the bars while Steve walked deeper into the dark room. A light flicked on, and everything inside that cage became visible. Tools lined the walls. Pliers, saws, hammers. They were stained dark. In the center of the room sat a wooden chair. Strapped to it was a kid, maybe 12 years old. A laptop sat on a table nearby. Steve was standing in front of it, typing. But the worst part wasn't the tools. It was what Steve was wearing. A clown costume. Not the bright, colorful one he used for parties. This one was cheap, dirty, splattered with old blood, and over his face he wore a twisted rubber clown mask, the kind that looked like it belonged in a nightmare. "Steve?" I whispered. He raised one finger to the lips of the mask. "Shh." Then he turned on the webcam. Within seconds, the live stream filled with viewers. Hundreds. Then thousands. "Good evening, everyone," Steve said cheerfully. "Sal the Sadist is back with another show." My stomach dropped. He grabbed the boy by the shoulders. "Tonight's guest is Larry. Larry's been bullying one of his classmates." The chat exploded with messages. "Kill him. Punish him. Make him suffer." A huge donation popped up. $1,000. Message attached. "Take his eye." Before I could process what was happening, Steve grabbed a pair of pliers and did exactly that. The boy's scream still echoes in my head. Something inside me snapped. I jumped the bars and grabbed the first thing I could reach. A hammer. Steve didn't even see me coming. The hammer connected with the side of his head, and he dropped like a sack of bricks. I untied the kid as fast as I could. He was shaking so badly, I had to carry him out of the house. Once we got far enough away, I called the police. When they arrived, they found Steve unconscious in the basement. The live stream was still running, and the laptop was full of recordings. Hours and hours of them. Different kids, different shows, different audiences cheering it all on. Steve, Sal the Sadist, became national news overnight. The killer clown from the dark web. He's in prison now. Probably for the rest of his life. As for me, well, parents in my town don't hire clowns anymore. Not after that story broke. I lost my apartment not long after. Turns out saving a kid doesn't pay the rent. Sometimes I sit and think about the night at that bar, about the moment I told Steve he should try becoming a clown. And I can't help wondering how many kids would still be alive if I'd kept that stupid idea to myself. Every year when Halloween gets close, I feel the same strange chill crawl down my spine. It happens without fail the night before October 31st. I'm not a kid anymore, but that feeling always drags me back to one particular Halloween from my childhood. I grew up in a small town in Alabama with my father and my younger sister, Kathy. Our mother died when we were both very young. Too young to really understand what it meant to lose someone forever. One day she was there, and then suddenly she wasn't. After that, it was just the three of us. My dad did everything he could to raise us right. He worked long hours, cooked our meals, helped us with school, and still found time to make us laugh. Looking back, I realize he must have been exhausted all the time, but he never showed it. Kathy was 4 years younger than me. She was the quiet type, shy, soft-spoken, and always a little withdrawn. I, on the other hand, was the opposite. I talked a lot, made friends easily, and spent most afternoons running around outside with the neighborhood kids. Because Kathy struggled to make friends, I always made sure she could tag along with us. I didn't want her to feel left out. Sometimes the other kids teased me for it. They'd say things like, "Why do you always bring your weird little sister?" Or, "No one wants to play with her." One day, a boy named Benny said something like that right in front of her. Before I even realized what I was doing, I punched him square in the mouth. That night, Kathy cried harder than I'd ever seen before. While Dad tried to comfort her, she said something that made the room go silent. "I want Mom." Dad didn't say anything after that. He just hugged her tighter. My dad loved our mother deeply. Even years after she passed, he refused to remarry. My aunt tried countless times to introduce him to someone, but he always turned it down. He once told me quietly, "No one could ever love you too the way your mother did." I think that's why he chose to stay alone. The year this story happened, I was 6 years old and Kathy was 4. It was October, and the whole town was getting ready for Halloween. Pumpkins were sitting on porches, fake spiderwebs hung from fences, and kids were already showing off their costumes. I was excited. Kathy, however, seemed nervous. It was going to be her very first time going trick-or-treating. Dad carved pumpkins with us and bought whatever decorations we wanted. By the afternoon of Halloween, our porch looked like something out of a spooky movie. My best friend, Jim, came over that evening. We sat on the porch drinking lemonade while watching the neighborhood come alive with excitement. Kids ran up and down the street. Parents laughed while hanging decorations. Everything felt perfect. Then I heard Kathy talking. Her bedroom window was right next to the porch where Jim and I were sitting. At first, I didn't think much about it. But then I realized something strange. Dad had just left to buy groceries, which meant Kathy was alone in her room. So who was she talking to? Curious, I got up and walked to her window. I leaned in and looked inside. Kathy was sitting on her bed holding her teddy bear. She wasn't looking at the window, though. She was staring directly at the closed bedroom door. "Hey," I said. "Who are you talking to?" She jumped slightly when she saw me. "No one," she said quickly. "Why are you standing outside my window?" "Dad went to the store," I replied. "Jim and I are outside if you need anything." She nodded and smiled, but something about her expression made me uneasy. Later that evening we were having dinner when something else strange happened. Dad was cooking steak while I sat at the table telling him about my Batman costume. Kathy was outside on the porch playing with one of her dolls. That's when we heard her humming. It was a melody I had never heard before. It sounded slow and eerie, almost like an old lullaby. Dad suddenly stopped cooking. His face turned pale. "Kathy," he called out, "where did you learn that tune?" She looked at him blankly. "What tune?" "The one you're humming." She shook her head. "I wasn't humming anything." Dad stared at her for a moment before forcing a smile. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's eat." But I could tell something was bothering him. That night, I woke up to the sound of laughter. It was coming from Kathy's room. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in a long time. Curious, I got out of bed and walked down the hallway. When I opened her bedroom door, a loud crash startled me. Her bedside lamp had fallen to the floor, but just before it dropped, I swear I saw it floating in the air. Kathy was sitting on the bed, giggling. "What was that?" I asked nervously. "What was what?" she replied. "The lamp. It was in the air." She simply shook her head. "No, it wasn't." The room suddenly felt freezing cold. Kathy lay down and closed her eyes, completely ignoring me. I slowly backed out of the room. The next morning I told Dad everything. He didn't say much, but I could see worry in his eyes. Still, the excitement of Halloween distracted us from thinking too much about it. When night finally arrived, the streets were filled with kids in costumes. "Trick or treat" echoed everywhere. I wore my Batman costume, and Kathy proudly wore a Superman cape. We met up with Jim and another friend named Mike and started visiting houses for candy. After we covered most of our neighborhood, Jim suggested we go farther down the road. Dad had warned me not to go too far, but I was 6. So we went anyway. Soon the houses became fewer and farther apart. The road eventually led toward a patch of woods. That's when we saw it. An old, run-down house standing alone. It looked abandoned, but sitting on the porch was a large carved pumpkin with a candle glowing inside. "Let's try that house," Jim said. Mike and I walked toward it. When I turned around, Kathy hadn't moved. She stood several feet behind us, staring at the house with wide, terrified eyes. "We shouldn't go there," she whispered. "It's just a house," I said, but she shook her head. Something about the place clearly scared her. Still, we climbed the porch steps. Jim knocked on the door. Nothing. Mike kicked the door lightly in frustration. It slowly creaked open. Inside was a dark hallway that smelled old and damp. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. We were about to leave when a voice suddenly came from inside. "Come on in." It was a woman's voice, soft but unsettling. I was about to step inside when Kathy suddenly grabbed my arm. "Don't!" she screamed. "It's her." "Who?" I asked. Her voice trembled. "Blue-faced Mummy." The words sent chills through all of us. Mike didn't wait around. He ran. Jim followed right behind him. Before we could move, the voice from inside the house spoke again. This time it sounded angry. "Kathy, bring him in." Kathy started crying. "You're not my mommy," she screamed. Then she dragged me down the porch steps, and we ran all the way home. When we reached our house, Kathy burst into tears and clung to Dad. "I lied," she sobbed. "Blue-faced Mommy taught me that song." Dad's face went pale. "What does she look like?" he asked slowly. "Her face is blue," Kathy whispered, "and her eyes don't have eyelids." That night we all slept together in Kathy's room. At some point in the middle of the night I woke up to Dad shouting into the darkness. "We don't need you," he yelled. "Leave my family alone." After that night, Kathy never talked about the blue-faced mommy again. She never hummed that strange tune again either. Life slowly returned to normal. But sometimes I still think about that abandoned house, about the voice calling us inside, and the way it knew my sister's name. I became a mother pretty early in life. I was only 24 when my son Ryan was born, and by the time I turned 26, my daughter Jessica came into the world. My marriage didn't last very long, so before I knew it, I was raising 2 children on my own. It wasn't easy, but my kids meant everything to me. Ryan was energetic and curious about everything, while Jessica was sweet, quiet, and always smiling. No matter how stressful life got, seeing them happy made everything worth it. As they grew older, I noticed that they had one favorite time of the year: Halloween. Every October their excitement would grow stronger. Ryan loved scary costumes and pretend swords, while Jessica loved dressing like a fairy with glittery wings. I used to make their costumes myself every year, and they would proudly show them off to everyone. Because they loved Halloween so much, I started hosting a Halloween party at our house every year. It began as a small gathering with a few neighbors and their children, but after the first party it slowly turned into a tradition. Soon, the entire neighborhood was coming over. Kids would run around in costumes, parents would talk and laugh, and bowls of candy would cover every table in the house. It was always the happiest night of the year. Everything stayed that way until the year our new neighbor moved in. His name was Angus Duncan. From the moment I met him, I knew he was a strange man. The best way I could describe him was that he seemed like someone who belonged in another century. While everyone else used lawnmowers, he cut his grass with an old curved blade. If someone tried calling him, he would politely ask them to send him a letter instead. One afternoon, I asked him why he avoided modern things. He looked at me seriously and said, "The original is always better." I laughed and agreed without thinking much about it. When October arrived that year, I began preparing for the annual Halloween party again. I sent invitations to everyone in the neighborhood. Then I suddenly realized something. I hadn't invited Mr. Angus. Even though he didn't have kids, I thought it would be rude to leave him out. So I walked over to his house and invited him personally. When I mentioned Halloween, he frowned. "Halloween," he said. "Don't you mean Samhain?" I didn't know what he meant, so I just apologized and explained that it was mainly a party for the children. The moment I mentioned kids, his expression changed. "Children will be there?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Then I will come," he said. "Perhaps I can show you how to celebrate it properly." I remember walking home thinking he was an odd man, but harmless. I couldn't have been more wrong. Halloween night arrived, and the party began just like every other year. Kids were running through the house, laughing in their costumes, while parents stood around talking. Ryan was dressed as a pirate that year. Jessica had chosen a fairy costume with sparkling wings. Seeing them so happy filled my heart with joy. About halfway through the party, Mr. Angus arrived carrying a wooden box. Inside it were strange pieces of candy I had never seen before. They didn't have any wrappers and looked homemade. When I offered to place them on the candy table, he quickly refused. "No," he said. "I will give them to the children myself." Before I could question him further, he walked away. Soon he gathered all the kids together and shouted, "Come here, children! I have magical candy from my homeland." The children rushed toward him excitedly, including Ryan and Jessica. Within minutes, every piece of candy had been eaten. At first, everything seemed normal. Then, suddenly, one child started coughing. Another child began gasping for air. Within seconds, the entire room turned into chaos. Children began collapsing to the floor, choking and shaking. Parents screamed and rushed to grab their kids. I ran toward Ryan and Jessica and held them tightly in my arms. "Someone call an ambulance," I screamed. But before anyone could do anything, Mr. Angus shouted loudly from the center of the room, "Witness, Samhain!" Everyone stopped and stared at him in horror. He began walking around the room calmly as if nothing was wrong. "The veil between worlds is thin tonight," he said. "Their sacrifice will protect us from the dark spirits." His words barely registered in my mind. All I could think about was my children. Ryan and Jessica had stopped moving. I looked around the room and realized the same thing had happened to the other children too. The house filled with crying parents. Then Mr. Angus said something that I will never forget. "Do not cry," he said calmly. "Children can always be replaced." That was the moment the men in the room rushed him and pinned him to the floor. Police and paramedics arrived soon after, but it was already too late. The candy had been poisoned with cyanide. 34 children died that night. My son Ryan was 7 years old. My daughter Jessica was 5. The investigation later revealed that Mr. Angus believed in an ancient Celtic ritual connected to Samhain. In his twisted mind, sacrifices were necessary to keep evil spirits away. He had chosen the children as his offering. He was sentenced to life in prison. But even after 5 years, nothing can erase what happened that night. I buried both of my children because of that man. And even today, whenever I hear someone say the phrase, "the original is always better," it sends a cold shiver down my spine.